I'm gonna start off by being completely honest here. I never expected Sony to actually make this camera, the A7C Mark II, but it does support a theory that I've had for a little while now that Sony is basically trying to create as many combinations of their sensors, their body styles, and their features as possible to give photographers, videographers, vloggers, camera users in general a ton of potential options to choose from. I mean, they already have the stuff, so they might as well give us the options, right? So if you're already familiar with Sony's cameras, you're gonna recognize basically everything that the A7C Mark II has to offer, but this is the only camera where you're going to get this specific combination of features and functions in this way. So in this video, we're gonna talk through what makes the A7C Mark II unique, as well as the things that make it not so unique, and where it sits in the Sony lineup to try and help you decide whether it makes sense for you. So secure the cup, and let's get into it. At the very heart of the A7C Mark II, we have the 33 megapixel back illuminated full frame sensor. This is the same sensor that you may know from the A7 IV, and it's designed as a balanced sensor with hybrid video and photo shooters in mind. We've also got the familiar Bionz XR processor from the A7 IV and other Sony cameras, but they've also added the extra AI processor that we've seen on the A7R5 and ZVE1. The AI processor is dedicated to autofocus performance, which does two things for this camera. First, it takes some of the load of the processing off of that main processor, allowing it to perform better. Secondly, it allows for a whole host of new autofocus features that we didn't see in the A7 IV. So we still have human, animal, and bird autofocus modes, but they've also added a hybrid bird and animal autofocus mode, as well as insects, cars and trains, and airplane modes. The AI processor also allows for more advanced subject recognition and something called human pose estimation. What that means is that the camera can tell the shape of a subject and the pose that it's in, even if the face isn't visible, something they couldn't do before. So if your subject is turned away, has something covering their face like a helmet, glasses, or a mask, the camera will still know where they are and where it should focus. In a nutshell, this has the current top-of-the-line Sony autofocus performance, which in my experience is awesome, and the general consensus seems to agree with that. For photo shooters, that 33 megapixel sensor is going to give you plenty of resolution for most cases, and the images that it produces are great. I've had my A7 IV for a couple of years now, and I have never been disappointed with it. One thing that we are seeing added for photo shooters is the new focus stacking mode that we saw on the A7R5. This allows you to choose the width between focus steps and the number of different focused photos that it will take, and it will automatically do that focus stacking for you. However, it doesn't combine the photos for you. You still need to do that in your editor of choice. For video shooters, we've got up to 10-bit 422 capability, which allows for shooting an S-Log3 picture profile and still having plenty of capability to push and grade that footage. The A7C Mark II also has all of Sony's expected video codecs, including XAVC-SI All Intra, XAVC-HS, the H.265 option, and then of course we have the older but still solid XAVC-S H.264 option. Just like we saw in the A7 IV, we've got 4K up to 30 frames per second, and that's oversampled from the full 7K sensor output, so it's super crisp video quality. And also, just like the A7 IV, we've got 4K 60 frames per second, but that's also got that 1.5 times APS-C crop on it, which can kind of be annoying at times from a framing standpoint, but the quality is still solid. On the A7C Mark II, they've also added the ability to import and display custom Luts, which is a great feature to have. Another addition for this camera is the auto framing features that we saw from the Sony ZVE1. This allows you to set up your shot a little wider than you need, and the camera will reframe and follow the main subject as if there was a camera person moving the camera around with them. This is a super useful feature, especially for people who film themselves but still want to have that camera move. movement. And because of the high resolution sensor, it can crop in quite a bit without any visible loss in quality. So pretty much everything that we've talked about so far is a mishmash of other features from other full-frame Sony cameras, but where this camera is really different is in its body, which is more similar to Sony APS-C cameras. The A7C Mark II has a rangefinder style body with the electronic viewfinder off to the left side and more low profile controls on the top, allowing it to be much more compact than the rest of the Sony Alpha lineup. Technically, even though it's a full frame camera, it's actually a hair smaller than the APS-C A6700, though not really by a meaningful amount. The ports on the left-hand side include a microphone input, a USB-C that can be used for either charging or for live streaming, or for both at the same time. And just like the previous A7C, we've only got a single SD card slot. For professional work, this is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people if you like having live backups. The SD card slot uses UHS 2 compatibility, but it isn't a dual slot for CF Express Type A cards like in some other Sony cameras. And at the bottom, we've got our headphone output as well as an annoyingly tiny micro HDMI. I guess if you want a compact camera body, you need to lose some things. It still works the same as a full-size HDMI, but it's just a lot flimsier. The A7C Mark II uses the fantastic Z100 batteries that we see on nearly all Sony cameras these days, which is nice for first-time buyers, but also for people who might already have a stack of these batteries laying around. It's also got a familiar swivel screen that we've seen on many Sony cameras so far, though it didn't get that tilt and swivel screen that we saw on the A7R5. Diving further into the controls of this camera, we have a pretty typical layout of buttons and dials with a couple of fairly significant updates. The big main update is that they've added a dial to the front of the grip, which I know was something that was a huge pain and disappointment on the original A7C. So now you can control the aperture and shutter speed separately from the front and back dials, or however you choose to set it up. And while we do seem to have an improved grip from the original A7C, it's still a little bit smaller than the nice hefty grips of the rest of the Alpha series. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is where it's smaller than the A6700. On top of the camera, we've got a customizable dial as well as a dedicated record button, or you can customize that if you prefer to use the shutter button to start recording. And we've also got the newest Sony style of mode switch dial that includes the main mode dial on top and the three-way toggle between video, photo, and Sony's S and Q modes for slow motion or time-lapse shooting on the bottom. On the back of the camera, we've got a couple of custom buttons, an AF on button, the function button, playback toggle, and the main dial with its directional and center buttons. It's not as many customizable buttons as we see on some of the other Sony Alpha cameras, but it kind of makes sense with less real estate to work with. That being said, the A7C Mark II incorporates the newest touchscreen functionality that allows you to change the main settings on the screen, swipe up to access your function menu, or swipe in from the sides to access even more custom functions. To me, this means that losing a few custom buttons really isn't a big deal. However, losing the focus joystick, that does kind of hurt. I would have loved to see them find a way to fit in that joystick on the back, even if it meant losing another button on the back. And the joystick on my A7 IV is a button too, so technically you wouldn't be losing anything. That being said, the touchscreen also works to move the focus point, of course, so maybe that's just my preference. The body of this camera has the typical dust and moisture resistance from Sony, so there are seals all over with all the openings, so you can take it out in plenty of harsh conditions. And we've got 7 steps of in-body stabilization in this camera according to Sony, which is an upgrade from the A7 IV where they only claimed 5.5, but it isn't quite as heavy as the A7R5 that they gave 8 steps to. Personally, I found the stabilization to be great for both video in standard and active modes, as well as for photos with slow shutter speeds. So here's the thing. This camera is all about context. In fact, at this point, all Sony camera options are about keeping in mind the context of the other cameras that are available. So as you saw, most of the features on this camera are just cherry-picked from other cameras in the Sony lineup, and the main thing that makes this camera unique is its compactness. hence the C in the name. So the main consideration that goes into choosing this camera should be that you're looking for a compact camera. But you do still basically get all of the newest features that Sony has to offer. Killer sensor, great autofocus, touchscreen functionality, etc. However, if you're looking for a more professional camera for your professional work, but with similar specs, look at the A7 IV. The dual card slots, bigger grip, and center EVF make that camera feel a bit more like a professional camera. However, if dual card slots and a full-size HDMI isn't necessary for you, this is actually a step up from the A7 IV in a lot of ways, and it's a little bit less expensive too. And with the EVF and higher resolution sensor, the A7C Mark II is definitely a more hybrid camera than something like the ZV-E1, which is very similar again, but definitely lacks photo-centric features. And just to make things even more confusing for people out there buying cameras, Sony is also releasing an A7CR with the high resolution sensor from the A7R5, but in this same body, so there's even more to choose from. There are going to be links to both the A7C Mark II and the A7CR down in the description if you want to check them out more. But as always, I want to hear from you. Are you excited about the A7C Mark II or the A7CR, or are you looking at something else in the Sony lineup? Leave a comment down below, and on your way down there, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Check out this video next. I think you'll really like it, and I'll see you next time.